What if I told you the reason your prayers feel like they're hitting the ceiling and falling back down isn't because God isn't listening, but because your body is too loud to hear yourself? There are 3 foods you're probably eating right now that are quietly dulling your spirit, numbing your focus, and weakening the power behind your words. And once you see them, you won't be able to unsee them. Let me ask you something honestly. Have you ever prayed, but your mind wandered, your heart felt tired, your words felt empty? Not because you don't care, but because you felt disconnected. Here's the truth most people won't tell you. Your spiritual life doesn't live in isolation from your physical habits. What you eat shapes how you think, how you feel, how deeply you connect, and connection is the currency of prayer. Ultra-processed food isn't just about what's in the package, it's about what's missing from your life when you rely on it. When you eat something that's been engineered in a factory instead of grown, raised, or prepared with intention, you're not just feeding your body, you're training your nervous system. These foods are designed to hit pleasure centers fast and hard. They flood your brain with dopamine, then leave you flat. That cycle of spike and crash creates emotional numbness over time. You stop feeling things deeply, not just joy, but sadness, gratitude, and reverence too. And prayer depends on your ability to feel. It's not a mechanical act, it's an emotional and spiritual exchange. When your emotional range gets compressed, your prayers start to sound the same every day. Not because you don't mean them, but because your inner world has gone quiet in the wrong way. There's also the issue of attention. Ultra-processed foods train your brain to crave instant reward. They make patience feel uncomfortable. They make stillness feel boring. Prayer, on the other hand, is built on presence. It asks you to slow down, to listen, to sit with silence. When your nervous system is wired for constant stimulation, that silence feels unbearable. Your mind starts jumping. Your body feels restless. Your thoughts scatter. You're technically praying, but you're not really there. It's like trying to have a deep conversation while a TV is blaring in the background. The words are coming out of your mouth, but your awareness is elsewhere. Another layer is how these foods affect your physical energy. They weigh you down. They inflame your system. They drain you in subtle ways you don't notice until you try to be still. Your breathing gets shallow. Your body feels heavy. Your posture collapses, and when your body collapses, your sense of meaning often collapses with it. You don't feel lifted, you feel pulled downward. That changes the tone of your prayers. They become requests from exhaustion instead of expressions of connection. Over time, this creates a spiritual dullness, not disbelief, not rebellion, just fog. You still believe, you still care, but you don't feel sharp, you don't feel open, you don't feel tuned in. And when your inner antenna is bent out of shape, it's harder to feel like your words are going anywhere at all. Excess sugar doesn't just affect your waistline, it quietly rewires how your mind and emotions work. When you consume a lot of sugar, your brain gets hit with a fast rush of pleasure chemicals. It feels good for a moment, comforting, soothing, even grounding, but that feeling doesn't last. The crash comes quickly, and with it comes irritability, fatigue, and a subtle sense of emptiness. Over time, your system starts depending on that cycle. You go from high to low, from comfort to craving, from stimulation to restlessness. That emotional roller coaster makes it harder to stay centered. Prayer requires emotional stability. It asks you to come from a place of grounded intention. When your inner world is constantly swinging, your words lose depth and consistency. Sugar also trains your attention to seek quick hits instead of sustained focus. Your mind gets used to stimulation, to reward without effort. Stillness starts to feel uncomfortable. Silence feels awkward. When you sit down to pray, your thoughts don't want to settle. They race. They look for something else to latch on to. You're saying the words, but part of you is already reaching for the next distraction. That divided state weakens the power of intention behind what you're saying, not because you don't care, but because your nervous system is addicted to movement instead of presence. There's also a spiritual dimension to how sugar affects desire. It teaches you to soothe every discomfort instead of sitting with it. Prayer often begins where discomfort lives: longing, confusion, fear, gratitude, surrender. These emotions ask you to stay with them. Sugar teaches you to escape them. So instead of entering prayer with honesty and openness, you arrive already numbed, already padded, already slightly disconnected from what's really going on inside you. Over time, this creates a subtle distance between your inner life and your outer words. You still pray, you still mean it, but your emotional depth has been flattened by constant quick comfort, and prayer without emotional depth becomes routine instead of relational. Heavy, greasy overeating doesn't just sit in your stomach, it settles into your entire system. When you consistently eat more than your body actually needs, especially foods that are dense, oily, and hard to digest, your energy gets pulled downward. Blood flow shifts toward digestion, your body goes into processing mode, and everything else slows. Your mind feels foggy, your eyelids get heavy, your breathing becomes shallow. You're not fully present anymore, you're just full. And presence is the foundation of meaningful prayer. It's hard to connect deeply when your body is busy trying to survive a food overload. There's also a relationship between physical heaviness and emotional heaviness. When your body feels weighed down, your emotions often follow. You feel less inspired, less alert, less uplifted. You're more likely to feel indifferent than devoted, not because your faith is weak, but because your physiology is tired. Prayer isn't just words, it's posture, breath, awareness, and intention working together. When your posture slumps and your breath shortens, your sense of reverence shrinks with it. Overeating also disrupts your sense of discipline. When you ignore your body's natural signals of enough, you weaken your ability to listen in other areas too. You start overriding subtle cues instead of respecting them. That same pattern can show up in your spiritual life. You speak, but you don't listen. You ask, but you don't pause. You pray, but you don't receive. Not because nothing is being given, but because you've trained yourself to keep filling instead of creating space. Space is essential for prayer. Space in your stomach, space in your breath, space in your mind. When you're constantly full, there's no room. No room for stillness, no room for sensitivity, no room for awe. Over time, that fullness becomes a kind of spiritual congestion. You're not blocked by doubt, you're blocked by excess. And excess always drowns out the subtle things that require quiet to be heard. Discipline in the small things is where real power is built. Not in dramatic moments, but in quiet, repeated choices no one else sees. Every time you choose what to eat, how much to eat, when to stop, when to rest, and when to be still, you're training your mind and body to either listen or ignore. Most people think spiritual strength comes from belief alone, but belief without structure gets soft. It loses shape. Discipline gives belief a spine. It turns intention into alignment. When you consistently do the small right things, your nervous system starts to trust you. Your mind becomes steadier. Your emotions become less reactive. And when your inner world is stable, your prayers carry more weight because they're not coming from chaos. They're coming from order. Small disciplines also sharpen your sense of self-control. When you say no to a second portion you don't need, you're not just managing food, you're strengthening the part of you that can pause before acting. That same pause is what allows you to listen in prayer instead of just talking. It's what lets you feel instead of rushing past emotion. It's what keeps you from filling every silence with noise. Discipline trains you to tolerate stillness, and stillness is where depth lives. There's also something powerful about integrity in the small things. When your actions match your values in ordinary moments, you start to trust yourself. That self-trust creates confidence, not ego, but a grounded sense that your words mean something. So when you speak in prayer, you're not just repeating phrases. You're speaking from a life that's been practiced into coherence. Your habits and your hopes start to match. Your routines and your reverence line up. Over time, this consistency builds inner authority, not dominance, not control over others, but mastery over your own impulses. You become less scattered, less divided, more whole. And when you're whole, your prayers don't feel fragmented. They feel focused, they feel honest, they feel anchored. You're no longer asking from a place of contradiction, where your life says one thing and your lips say another. You're asking from a place of alignment, where your choices, your posture, your breath, and your words are all pointing in the same direction. If this is hitting you right now, type a line in the comments. And share this with someone who's been praying, but feels like their words aren't landing. Because maybe the breakthrough isn't in praying harder, it's in living clearer. Spiritual strength is often misunderstood as something that lives only in belief, as if thinking the right thoughts or saying the right words is enough to create power. But belief without alignment is fragile. It's like aiming an arrow with your eyes closed. You may be sincere, but sincerity alone doesn't guarantee direction. Alignment is what brings your inner world and outer life into agreement. It's when what you say you value is reflected in how you eat, how you speak, how you rest, how you treat people, and how you spend your time. When those things are out of sync, your spiritual life feels strained. You believe one thing, but you live another, and that split creates inner tension. That tension shows up in prayer. You might still pray, still hope, still ask, but something feels off. Your words don't feel grounded in your life. Alignment removes that gap. It makes your inner intentions and outer actions move in the same direction. When your habits support your values, your nervous system relaxes. You're not fighting yourself anymore. Your mind becomes clearer because it's not constantly justifying contradictions. You don't have to convince yourself you care because your daily choices already prove it. Alignment also affects how open you are. When your life is cluttered with behaviors that drain you, distract you, or dull you, your inner sensitivity weakens. You stop noticing subtle emotions. You stop catching quiet insights. You stop feeling guided. But when your actions match your intentions, you become more receptive. You start to feel when something is right or wrong. You sense when to speak and when to be silent. That sensitivity is part of spiritual strength. It's not loud, it's accurate. Another part of alignment is integrity with yourself. When you say you want peace but live in constant chaos, your spirit doesn't trust your words. When you say you want closeness but avoid stillness, your heart doesn't feel safe enough to open. Alignment rebuilds that trust. It tells your inner world that your words mean something, that you're not just asking for change, you're living like you expect it. This is why alignment creates power, not power over others, but power within. You stop leaking energy through contradiction. You stop being divided between what you say and what you do. your life becomes simpler, not easier, but clearer. And clarity is what gives spiritual practices depth. When your actions, values, body, and attention are working together, your prayers don't feel like wishes. They feel like expressions of a life that's already moving in the direction you're speaking into existence. When you talk about spiritual strength, people often imagine something mystical or distant, but a huge part of it is very practical: alignment. Alignment is what happens when your inner intentions and your outer actions stop fighting each other. When what you believe, what you say, and what you actually do start pointing in the same direction. Without alignment, your life feels noisy inside. You want one thing, but you live another. You pray for peace, but your habits create chaos. You ask for clarity, but your routines feed confusion. That inner friction drains energy, and drained people don't move powerfully in any area of life, including spiritually. Alignment gives your inner world a sense of order. When your choices support your values, your nervous system relaxes. You're no longer constantly justifying yourself or making excuses in your own head. That mental quiet creates space for awareness, space for sensitivity, space for intention. And intention is what gives prayer direction. Without it, words are just sound. With it, words carry meaning. There's also something grounding about living in a way that matches what you ask for. If you pray for discipline but live indulgently, your spirit feels divided. If you pray for closeness but avoid stillness, your heart feels guarded. Alignment removes that split. It allows your inner life to trust your outer life. And when your inner life trusts you, it opens more easily. You feel less defensive, less scattered, less numb. Alignment also sharpens your perception. When you stop dulling yourself with distractions and excess, you start noticing subtleties again. You notice shifts in your mood. You notice when something feels right or wrong. You notice when you're being guided or warned. That awareness is part of spiritual strength. It's not about force, it's about accuracy. Being able to sense what aligns and what doesn't. This is why alignment matters more than intensity. You don't need louder prayers. You need a life that agrees with them. When your habits, your body, your attention, and your values are working together, your spiritual life stops feeling strained and starts feeling steady. You're no longer trying to push energy upward from a misaligned foundation. You're letting it rise naturally from a life that's already pointing in the same direction. Spiritual strength is often mistaken for how strongly you believe something, how passionate you feel, or how intense your prayers sound. But belief on its own doesn't automatically create power. You can believe deeply and still feel stuck, disconnected, or ineffective. That's because spiritual strength isn't built only in your thoughts. It's built in how your life is arranged. Alignment is what turns belief into something that actually moves energy. It's the difference between wanting something and living in a way that supports it. When your beliefs and your habits don't match, your inner world becomes divided. You might say you value peace, but your lifestyle is rushed and chaotic. You might say you want clarity, but you fill every quiet moment with noise and distraction. That contradiction weakens your spiritual posture. It creates friction inside you, and friction burns energy. You're spending more effort managing inner conflict than cultivating inner depth. Alignment removes that conflict. When your actions reflect what you say you believe, your inner world starts to feel stable. You don't have to convince yourself you're serious because your life already shows it. Your nervous system feels safer. Your mind feels steadier. Your emotions feel less reactive. And from that steadiness, spiritual strength grows naturally. not as force, but as presence. Alignment also affects your sense of authority. When you live in a way that contradicts your values, your words lose weight even to yourself. But when your choices, routines, and relationships match your beliefs, your voice gains gravity. You speak from experience, not just intention. Your prayers don't feel like requests from a divided place. They feel like expressions of a life that's already moving in the direction you're asking for. This is why alignment is more important than intensity. You don't need to believe louder, you need to live clearer. When your body, your time, your attention, and your values are all pointing the same way, your spiritual life stops feeling strained and starts feeling grounded. You're no longer trying to reach upward from a fractured foundation. You're rising from a life that's already oriented toward what you believe in. Spiritual strength isn't something that switches on just because you hold certain beliefs. Belief is important, but it's only the starting point. What actually gives your spiritual life depth is alignment. Alignment is when your thoughts, your habits, your emotions, and your choices all support the same direction. Without that, belief stays theoretical. You might agree with an idea in your mind, but your life isn't cooperating with it. And when your life isn't cooperating with your beliefs, your spiritual practices feel hollow, like you're repeating words without feeling their weight. Alignment shows up in very practical ways. It's in how you treat your body, how you manage your time, how you handle stress, and how you respond to people. If you say you value peace but constantly overstimulate yourself, your nervous system never settles enough to experience peace. If you say you value connection but avoid stillness, you never hear what's happening inside you. Alignment is what brings your inner life and outer life into agreement. It creates coherence. Coherence is what gives spiritual strength stability. When you're coherent, your mind isn't fighting your body, and your intentions aren't fighting your habits. You're not leaking energy through contradiction. That saved energy becomes presence. And presence is the real power behind prayer, meditation, or any spiritual act. It's not about how long you do it or how dramatic it sounds. It's about how fully you're there when you do it. When your life is aligned, your awareness sharpens. You become more sensitive to what's true for you. You notice when something feels off. You feel when you're centered and when you're not. That sensitivity isn't weakness, it's guidance. It helps you adjust your actions before you drift too far from what you value. This is why spiritual strength is about alignment, not just belief. Belief gives you direction. Alignment gives you movement. Without alignment, belief stays stuck in your head. With alignment, it moves through your body, your choices, and your relationships. Your spiritual life stops being something you think about and starts being something you live through everything you do. At the end of the day, this isn't about fear, guilt, or perfection. It's about awareness. It's about realizing that your spiritual life doesn't float above your daily habits. It grows out of them. What you eat, how you treat your body, how you handle excess, how you practice discipline, and how aligned your life is with what you say you believe all shape the strength of your connection. Prayer isn't just something you do with your mouth. It's something you do with your whole life. When your body is clear, your mind is steady, and your habits match your values, your prayers stop feeling like echoes and start feeling like conversations. Not because heaven suddenly opened, but because you did.